The alarm tore through the ship before I even opened my eyes. I was thrown against the restraint straps of my chair as the halcyon shuddered, and for one full second I believed we were about to die. Red light washed over the control room. Sophie Marsh was already at the helm, hands moving faster than I could follow, pulling us out of a spin that should not have started in the first place. "Talk to me," Captain Laura Bennett said, gripping the edge of her console. Her voice was steady, but I had worked with her long enough to hear the edge underneath it. "Gravity spike," Sophie said, "came out of nowhere. We almost clipped something the size of a moon." I unclipped myself and pulled up the sensor feed at my station. My hands were not as steady as I wanted them to be. We were far past Pluto now, further than any survey ship had gone before, chasing a signal that made no sense the moment we picked it up 3 weeks ago. A pulse of energy, old and strange, coming from empty space where nothing should exist. Nothing was empty anymore. "Oliver, are you seeing this?" I asked. Oliver Grant was already leaning so close to his screen that his nose nearly touched it. He was our science officer, the calmest person on the ship most days, but right now his jaw was tight. "I'm seeing it," he said, "and I don't believe it." The screen filled with shapes, hundreds of them, thousands, metal hulls tumbling slowly in the dark, some no bigger than a shuttle, some longer than 3 cities placed end to end. They drifted in loose, endless rings, catching the weak light of a star that was little more than a bright point behind us. "Wreckage," Captain Bennett said. "All of it." "Not all from the same place," Oliver said. "Look at the hull designs. That one has a ribbed structure I've never seen in any catalog. That one over there has triangular plating. This is not one battle. This is not one war." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. "How old?" I asked. Oliver ran the readings twice before he answered, and when he did, his voice had lost its usual confidence. "The freshest wreck out there is at least 400 years old. The oldest pieces, based on decay patterns and radiation signatures, could be 15,000 years old, maybe more." Nobody spoke for a moment. 15,000 years was not a number that fit inside my head easily. 15,000 years ago, humanity had barely learned to build permanent shelters. We had no writing, no cities, nothing that could reach beyond our own small world, let alone out here, past the edge of our solar system, in the freezing dark beyond Pluto. And yet here it was. A graveyard, not of one people but of many, stacked on top of each other across thousands of years, all gathered around the same point in space, like moths that had burned themselves trying to reach the same flame. "There," Sophie said quietly, and pointed at the main display. At the center of the drifting ring sat something that did not tumble like the rest. It held still, as if the wreckage around it respected a boundary the dead ships were not allowed to cross. It was dark, almost black, without a single light or marking on its surface. No antennae, no visible weapons, no engines that I could see. Just a shape, low and wide, more like a mountain that had been carved into a fortress than anything built by hands. "Passive scan only," Captain Bennett ordered. "Nothing active. I don't want to announce we're here until we understand what here is." Oliver adjusted his instruments. The results came back strange, and stranger the longer he looked at them. "It's not reflecting our scan the way it should," he said. "The surface is absorbing almost everything we send at it. And it's old, Captain. Older than anything else in this field. If the wreckage around it spans 400 to 15,000 years, this structure predates all of it, by a wide margin. So whoever built the wreckage came here to reach that thing," Ryan Cole said. Our security chief had come up from the lower deck and was standing in the doorway now, arms crossed, watching the screen with the flat expression of a man calculating odds. And none of them made it back. "We don't know that," Bennett said. "We know that not one of those ships is still powered," Ryan said. "We know that whatever happened to them happened close enough to that fortress that the debris field forms rings around it instead of a random scatter. That's not an accident, Captain. That's a wall nobody could get past." We were 4 months out from Earth, the longest run any of us had ever flown, and the Halcyon was never meant to find anything like this. Our mission had been simple on paper: chart the outer edge of the solar system, confirm the strange signal, log it, and return home with data for people far more important than us to study. Nobody had prepared us for a graveyard. I looked at the shape on the screen and felt a pull I could not fully explain. Curiosity, yes, the same hunger that had made me study dead languages and forgotten records since I was young enough to hold a book. But something else too. A kind of recognition, faint and impossible, like hearing a word in a language I did not know I understood. "Daniel," Bennett said, turning to me, "you're the closest thing we have to a specialist in old writing systems. If there's anything readable out there, I want your eyes on it before anyone else touches it." "Understood," I said, though my mouth had gone dry. We spent the next several hours mapping the field from a careful distance, marking every large piece of wreckage, cross-referencing hull designs against everything in our database. Most of it matched nothing we had ever recorded. A few fragments carried symbols that Oliver flagged as belonging to at least 3 different spacefaring peoples we had only ever detected through faint radio echoes. Never met, never confirmed to exist. Whoever they were not human, and they were not any species Earth had catalogued. All of them had come here. All of them had failed. As the hours passed, the fortress stayed silent. No response to our passive scans, no shift in position, no sign that it even registered we were there. It should have been comforting. Instead, it made the skin on the back of my neck prickle every time I looked at it. "I want a closer pass," Bennett finally said. "Slow, careful, weapons cold. I want to see the surface with our own cameras, not just sensor guesses." "Captain," Ryan said, "with respect, everything out here has a body count attached to it." "Noted," Bennett said. "Log it as a formal objection if you want. We're still going in slow." Ryan did not argue further, but he moved to the weapons station and began running diagnostics anyway, as if getting ready for something he could not name yet. I did not blame him. My own hands would not stop shaking slightly, though I told myself it was the temperature of the room and not the shape drifting closer on my screen. "I'm aware," Bennett said, "which is exactly why I want information instead of assumptions before we decide what to do next. Sophie, bring us in. Half speed. Any change at all, and we reverse immediately." Sophie nodded and began easing the ship forward, weaving carefully between the drifting hulls. I watched them slide past the viewport, close enough now to make out details. A hull plate scorched black, a section of frame bent as if some enormous hand had folded it like paper, a long spine of a ship split clean down the middle, its 2 halves drifting apart in slow, silent motion, forever falling away from each other in the dark. None of it looked like it had been in a fight with another fleet. There were no matching wounds, no return damage, nothing that suggested 2 forces trading blows. Every piece of wreckage looked like it had met something that simply erased it, quickly and completely, without needing to fight back. 50,000 kilometers to the structure, Sophie said. "Steady," Bennett replied. I kept my eyes on my display, searching the growing image of the fortress for anything resembling writing. At first there was nothing. The surface looked seamless, almost grown rather than built, its black material swallowing our light instead of reflecting it. Then, at 20,000 kilometers, I saw it. A line, faint and irregular, cut into the surface near what might have been an entrance. Then another line beside it. Then more, spreading outward in patterns that made something in my chest tighten with recognition even before I understood why. "Captain," I said, "I have markings. I need a higher resolution image." Oliver adjusted the cameras and the picture sharpened. Rows of carved symbols ran along the base of the fortress, some worn smooth by time, others still sharp-edged as if cut only recently. I leaned in, heart pounding, comparing shapes against the dead languages I had spent years learning. Most of it was unlike anything in our records. Alien scripts, dozens of different hands, different eras, carved by different visitors, leaving some kind of message behind before they vanished from history. But one symbol, small, half hidden beneath the newer carvings, stopped me completely. I had seen it before. Not in any alien archive. In a stone circle in Ireland. In a cave wall in southern France. In a fragment of pottery dug up on a hillside in Turkey, dated to a time long before anyone believed humans could carve anything at all. "That's not possible," I whispered. "What isn't?" Bennett asked, turning toward me. Before I could answer, every display on the ship flickered at once. The lights dimmed, then surged. A low hum rose from somewhere deep in the fortress ahead of us, a sound I felt in my bones more than heard through the hull. "Something's changing," Oliver said, voice tight. "Power signature just spiked. It's reading us. It's reading us specifically." "Reverse," Bennett ordered. "Now." Sophie's hands flew across the console, but the ship did not move the way it should have. For one terrifying moment, the engines answered late, sluggish, as if something invisible had reached out and placed a hand against our hull. Then, just as suddenly, it let go, and the Halcyon lurched backward into open space. On my screen, the ancient symbol I recognized began to glow, faint and blue, deep within the black stone of the fortress. It was waiting for something, and whatever it had been waiting for 15,000 years, I had the terrible feeling it had just found it in me. Nobody slept that night, if you could still call it night with no sun anywhere close enough to mark the hours. We gathered in the briefing room, all 5 of us, screens glowing with the images we had pulled from the fortress before pulling back. Captain Bennett stood at the head of the table, arms folded, waiting for someone to say something useful. "The glow stopped the second we hit 200,000 kilometers, Oliver said. "Whatever woke up in there went back to sleep once we backed off. No further power spikes, no further response." "Or it's letting us think that," Ryan said. "You always assume the worst," Oliver replied. "I assume the worst because the worst is usually right," Ryan said. "Look at that field out there. Thousands of ships, dozens of different builders, one thing in common. They all stopped moving forever the moment they got close enough to matter." Bennett raised a hand before the argument could grow. "Daniel, tell them what you found." I pulled up the image of the small, worn symbol I had spotted buried beneath the newer alien carvings. I placed it next to a photograph from my own research archive, a rubbing taken from a stone in Ireland, carved by hands that lived and died long before anyone wrote a single word down. The room went quiet. "That can't be the same mark," Sophie said. "One of those is from Earth." "I know," I said. I checked it 4 times before I said anything. The angles match, the depth of the cut, the spacing, even the small imperfection on the left edge. It's either an extraordinary coincidence, or someone carved the same symbol on a stone in Ireland, and on a black fortress past Pluto, thousands of years apart, and I don't believe in coincidences that large. So either ancient people from Earth reached farther into space than anyone has ever imagined, Oliver said slowly, or something out there visited Earth long before recorded history and left the same mark behind on both. Or a third answer we haven't thought of yet, Bennett said. Which is why we're not guessing. We're gathering more information before anyone makes a decision that can't be taken back. She turned to the main display and brought up the survey map we had built of the debris field, hundreds of wrecks marked in careful color-coded rings by estimated age. "I want a shuttle team to examine the nearest large wreck," she said. "Not the fortress. Not yet. I want to know who came here, when, and what happened to them before we go any closer to that structure. Daniel, Oliver, Ryan, you're with me on this one. Sophie stays with the ship." Sophie looked like she wanted to argue, but she only nodded. Someone needed to keep the Halcyon ready to move, and all of us knew it. The shuttle ride out to the nearest wreck took almost an hour, threading a careful path between drifting hulls the size of buildings. Up close, the wreckage looked even worse than it had on our screens. Metal that should have been thick enough to survive anything had been folded, twisted, or simply gone, as if entire sections had been removed rather than destroyed. "There," Oliver said, pointing through the shuttle window at a long, narrow ship with a ribbed hull, split open along one side, like a fruit peeled back to show its inside. "That one's intact enough to board. Sensors are picking up a stable internal structure. No radiation leaks, no active power. Ryan checked his equipment one more time before we docked, running his hand along the seal of his suit helmet in a habit I had noticed him do before every dangerous task since I had known him. "Everyone stays close," he said. "Anything moves that shouldn't move, you tell me before you touch it." We entered through the torn hull, our lights cutting through darkness that had not been broken in who knew how long. The corridor inside was narrow, built for a species smaller than us, with strange rounded doorways and markings along the walls in a script none of us recognized. "This isn't any of the wrecks we cataloged from a distance," Oliver said, running a scanner over the wall. "This hull design isn't in our database at all. We're looking at a species humanity has never had contact with." I moved closer to the markings, reading them the way I would read any unfamiliar language, searching for patterns, repetition, anything that might hint at meaning. Most of it meant nothing to me yet. Then, near what looked like a command chamber, I found something that made my chest tighten. Carved crudely, as if scratched in by hand rather than machine, was a set of marks laid over the original wall design. Whoever wrote them had done so after the ship stopped functioning, in the dark, likely by whatever weak light remained. "Captain," I said, "I think this is a message. Left by survivors." Bennett came to stand beside me, her light joining mine on the wall. "Can you read any of it?" "Not the words," I said, "but look at the pattern. Short lines, spaced like a countdown. Whoever wrote this was marking something. Time, maybe, or attempts." We found the same pattern in 3 more places as we moved deeper into the wreck. In the last chamber, close to what might have been an engine core, we found the marks stop entirely, midline, as if whoever had been carving them simply stopped in the middle of a thought. Nobody said anything for a long moment. "They didn't finish," Ryan said quietly. "Whatever they were counting toward, they didn't get there." "Or they did," Oliver said, "and there was nothing left to write with after." We moved on, before anyone could dwell on that thought too long. Deeper in the ship, we found more wreckage, more silence, more proof that whatever had happened here had happened quickly and completely. Then, in a chamber near what I guessed was the ship's memory core, Oliver's scanner lit up with an unexpected reading. "There's still a data cluster active in here," he said, surprised. "Barely holding a charge, but active. If I can tap into it without damaging the structure, we might get actual records instead of guesses." It took him nearly 20 careful minutes to build a safe connection between his equipment and the alien system. When the first images finally came through onto his portable display, none of us spoke for a long time. The recordings showed the ship's arrival, thousands of vessels forming up in careful formation around the fortress, an image that matched the modern wreckage almost exactly, except every hull was whole, every light was lit, every crew presumably still alive and hopeful. Then the recordings jumped forward, the timestamp skipping in strange, broken chunks, as if whatever recorded them had been damaged in the process. The final image showed the fortress from close range, its surface glowing faintly with the same blue light we had seen ourselves only hours earlier. Then the recording ended, cut off mid-frame, without any image of what came next. "Whatever hit them, it happened too fast to record," Oliver said, "or the recording device didn't survive long enough to capture it." "There has to be more than one story like this out there," Bennett said, looking around at the ruined ship. "How many species have come here across 15,000 years, found the same fortress, tried the same thing, and vanished the same way?" "All of them, if this field is any evidence," Ryan said. "Every single one." I felt the weight of that settle over me. 15,000 years of arrivals, each one confident, each one prepared, each one ending in silence. And somewhere in the middle of it, a mark that also existed on Earth, carved by hands that predated recorded human history. Before we left the memory core, Oliver pulled one more file from the failing system, a short audio clip buried under layers of damaged data. He hesitated before playing it. "It might be nothing," he said. Or it might be the last thing anyone on this ship ever said. He played it anyway. The sound that came through was not words I could understand, a series of low, breathy tones in a language built for a throat unlike mine. But the rhythm of it needed no translation. It rose and fell the way a voice rises and falls when someone is afraid, then steadied for a moment, as if the speaker had found some kind of resolve, then cut off completely mid-tone. Nobody spoke for a while after that. Whatever they were, Bennett said quietly, they were still someone, right up until the end. That's what worries me most, I said. Every wreck out there was flown by someone who believed they could handle whatever was waiting. Someone with a crew, a mission, probably a home somewhere they wanted to get back to. None of that saved them. Ryan checked the corridor behind us again, weapon steady but his eyes distant. Doesn't matter how confident you walk in. The graveyard doesn't ask about confidence. We moved further along the ship, past chambers that looked like they might have been living quarters, personal items still resting where they had been left, undisturbed by 15,000 years of cold and silence. Small carved figures, a row of containers, empty now, that might once have held food or water. A wall covered in careful, repeating patterns that Oliver guessed might have been decoration rather than writing, something built for comfort rather than communication. They tried to make this feel like a home, Sophie said quietly over the comm, watching our helmet feeds from the shuttle. Even out here, even on a ship built for war, they tried to make it feel like somewhere to live. It was the detail that stayed with me longest. Not the wreckage, not the silence, not even the countdown marks scratched into the wall by someone who never finished counting. It was the small, careful patterns on that one wall, made by hands that wanted their ship to feel less like a coffin and more like a place worth returning to. They never got the chance. We were about to leave the chamber when the entire wreck shuddered around us. That wasn't us, Ryan said immediately, weapon rising, though there was nothing visible to aim at. Power reading, Oliver said, voice climbing higher. Something just activated near the outer hull. Small, but active, and it's moving toward us. Back to the shuttle, Bennett ordered. Now. We moved quickly through the narrow corridors, lights bouncing wildly against the walls, the whole structure groaning around us as something deep inside the dead ship stirred awake after who knew how many centuries of silence. I did not look back to see what it was. None of us did. We reached the shuttle with seconds to spare, sealing the hatch just as a low, grinding noise rolled through the hull behind us, the sound of metal moving that had not moved in longer than human civilization had existed. Sophie's voice crackled through the comm the moment we cleared the wreck. I have you on visual. Get clear. Get clear now. Something is powering up across the entire field, not just that ship. I looked back through the shuttle window as we pulled away, and saw faint points of blue light blinking on across dozens of wrecks at once, scattered through the graveyard like eyes opening one by one in the dark. It's not the fortress waking up, Oliver said, staring at his readings in disbelief. It's the graveyard. Something in the wreckage itself is responding to us being here. Responding how? Bennett asked. Before Oliver could answer, every one of those small blue lights winked out at once, as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving the field dark and still again, as if nothing had happened at all. We made it back to the Halcyon in silence, none of us speaking until we were through the airlock and out of our suits. Bennett called us straight to the briefing room, no rest, no delay, and stood before the same table where we had started the day with far more confidence than any of us felt now. We have two choices, she said. We turn around, report everything we found, and let people with more resources than us decide what to do next. Or we go back out there, closer than we've gone before, and try to understand what that fortress actually is before we leave. Captain, Ryan said, with everything we've seen today, I have to ask if that's a decision worth making without backup. It might not be, Bennett admitted, but if we leave now, we leave not knowing why an Earth symbol is carved onto a structure that predates our recorded history by thousands of years. I don't like leaving with a question that big unanswered, and something tells me none of you do either. Nobody argued. Nobody agreed out loud either. But when I looked around the room, I saw the same hunger in every face that I felt in my own chest, the same pull toward an answer that terrified and fascinated us in equal measure. "We go back," Bennett said finally. "Careful, controlled. And if anything happens that we can't explain, we retreat immediately. No arguments, no second chances." I nodded along with the others, though somewhere deep down, I already suspected that whatever waited for us out there was not going to let us leave with only careful, controlled answers. 15,000 years of silence did not end with an easy conversation. It ended with something none of us were fully ready for, and we were flying straight toward it anyway. Before we broke from the briefing room, Bennett asked one more question, quieter than the rest. "Daniel, that symbol you found, if it really does match something from Earth, what does that tell you about who built that fortress in the first place?" I thought about the stone in Ireland, older than any city, carved by people who left no name behind, only a mark that somehow reappeared on a structure floating in the freezing dark past Pluto. "It tells me," I said slowly, "that whoever built it either knew about Earth long before we ever left it, or the mark means something so basic, so universal, that more than one people, across more than one era of history, reached for it without ever meeting each other. I don't know which answer frightens me more." Nobody had a response to that. We simply sat with it, the hum of the ship around us, the graveyard waiting patiently outside the hull, exactly as it had waited for 15,000 years before we ever arrived. We approached the fortress for the second time 3 days later, and this time nobody pretended to be calm about it. Bennett had spent those 3 days running every scan the Halcyon could manage from a safe distance, mapping the structure in more detail than before, searching for any weakness, any entrance, any pattern that might explain how something could sit untouched at the center of so much destruction. She found no weapons, no visible defenses, only that same seamless black surface, and near its base, the wide cluster of carved symbols we had photographed on our first pass. "If we're doing this," Ryan said, checking the shuttle's systems one final time before launch, "I want it on record that I think this is a mistake." "Noted," Bennett said, again. "I just want it clear whose idea this was when we're writing the report afterward." "If we're alive to write a report afterward," Oliver muttered, "I'll gladly give you full credit for the warning." I said nothing. My focus was on the symbol, the one that matched the stone in Ireland, glowing faintly in my memory, even though it had gone dark the moment we retreated. I could not explain the pull I felt toward it, only that it had grown stronger with every hour since we first saw it, like a word on the edge of my tongue that refused to come forward. The shuttle carried the 4 of us closer than we had ever been, past the outer rings of wreckage, into the strange quiet zone that seemed to surround the fortress like a held breath. Up close, the structure was even larger than our scans suggested, its surface curved in ways that made no clear sense, neither fully organic nor fully built by machine, something in between that our instruments struggled to categorize. "There," Oliver said, pointing to a section near the base where the black surface folded inward, forming what looked unmistakably like an entrance, tall enough for several people to walk through side by side. "That wasn't open on our first pass," Bennett said. "It wasn't," Oliver confirmed, checking his readings twice. "It opened sometime in the last few hours. Nothing else about the structure has changed." "It's letting us in," Ryan said flatly. "That should worry everyone in this shuttle a great deal more than it apparently does." "It worries me," I said quietly. "I'm going in anyway." Bennett looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "We all are, but Daniel goes first with me, since whatever's in there seems to be responding to something connected to him. Ryan, Oliver, you cover our approach and hold the line at the entrance until we call you forward." We suited up fully this time, sealed against whatever atmosphere or absence of it waited inside, and crossed the short distance from the shuttle to the black opening on foot, magnetic boots gripping a surface that felt disturbingly warm through the soles, as if something beneath it were still, faintly, alive. The entrance led into a wide corridor, lit by no visible source, though somehow we could see clearly enough to walk without our suit lights. The walls here were covered floor to ceiling in carvings, layer over layer, the oldest worn nearly smooth, the newest still sharp enough to catch a shadow. Different hands, different eras, different languages, all left in the same place by different visitors across thousands of years. "This isn't a fortress," I said slowly, reading as we walked. "Or it's not only a fortress, it's a record. Every people who came here left something behind." "Can you read any of it?" Bennett asked. "Bits and pieces, warnings mostly. One line here says something close to turn back, though I might be reading tone rather than exact meaning. Another further down looks like a count, similar to the marks we found on the wreck. Whoever carved this one didn't finish either." Further along, I stopped at a section of wall where the carvings seemed to change style entirely, the lines cleaner, more deliberate, arranged in careful rows rather than the crowded, overlapping scrawl covering most of the corridor. "This is different," I said. "Everything else looks added over time, one visitor after another, leaving their mark wherever there was room. This section looks original, like it was carved when the fortress itself was built, not afterward." Bennett moved closer, studying the rows with me. "Can you make out any of it?" "Some of it echoes the same symbol we found outside," I said, "repeated here, over and over, almost like a signature. And underneath it, smaller marks I don't recognize at all, though the spacing reminds me of counting systems used in some of the oldest human sites ever discovered." "You keep saying human," Oliver said quietly over the comm. "Are you certain?" "No," I admitted. "I'm not certain of anything in this corridor. I'm only certain that every instinct I have as someone who has spent his life studying old languages is telling me this feels less like discovering something alien and more like remembering something we lost." Nobody had an answer for that, and we walked on in silence, the hum of the structure growing steadily louder ahead of us, until the corridor widened and the ceiling rose away into darkness, and we found ourselves standing at the entrance to the chamber that had been waiting, patiently, for 15,000 years. We continued deeper, the corridor sloping gently downward, until it opened into a wide chamber unlike anything I had seen described in any record humanity possessed. The walls curved upward into a high, domed ceiling, and along every surface stood tall structures that looked, unmistakably, like shelves, holding objects too worn and strange to identify from a distance. "It's a library," Oliver said over the comm from the entrance, watching our helmet feed. "Or an archive. Whatever the fortress actually is, this room is where it keeps things." At the center of the chamber stood a single low platform, and on it, a smooth, dark console unlike the crude carvings covering everything else, clearly built with far more precision than anything around it, as if it belonged to an entirely different era of craftsmanship. As we stepped closer, faint light stirred beneath its surface, the same pale blue we had seen from the ship days earlier. "That's it," Bennett said quietly. "That's what woke up when we first approached." I stepped toward the console without meaning to, some instinct pulling me forward faster than caution should have allowed. Bennett caught my arm before I got too close. "Careful," she said. "We don't know what happens if you touch it." "We don't know what happens if I don't, either," I said. "And it's been waiting 15,000 years for something. I don't think we get to leave until it decides whether or not that something is me." She held my gaze for a long moment, then let go of my arm. "If anything changes, anything at all, you step back immediately. That's not a request." I nodded and reached toward the console. The moment my glove made contact with its surface, the blue light surged brighter, spreading outward across the platform in thin glowing lines, like veins lighting up beneath skin. A low hum rose through the floor, the same sound we had felt through the Halcyon's hull days before, and this close, it was almost unbearable, a vibration that settled into my chest and refused to leave. Then, without warning, an image formed in the air above the console, not solid, not quite light either, but something that occupied the space between both. It showed a version of Earth I did not recognize. No cities as we knew them. No familiar coastlines, just wide, unbroken landscapes, and scattered across them, structures built from the same black material as the fortress around us, towers and walls rising out of forests and plains in patterns too deliberate to be anything but planned. "That can't be Earth," Oliver said, staring at the transmitted feed from the entrance. "There's nothing in our history that matches that." "There's nothing in our recorded history," I corrected quietly, unable to look away from the image. "That doesn't mean it never happened." The image shifted, showing the same landscapes changing over time, structures rising, then falling, forests reclaiming stone, oceans creeping over lowlands that had once held cities none of us had ever heard of. Whatever this was, it spanned a length of time far greater than anything in humanity's written history. A story with no names, no dates, only the slow, patient rhythm of things being built and then lost. Buried within the shifting images, I caught brief glimpses of smaller moments too, fragments that felt less like history and more like memory. A group of figures standing together on a hillside, facing outward toward a horizon lit by something none of us could name. A single tall structure, half-built, scaffolding made of a material that bent like living wood. A child, or something shaped enough like a child that my chest tightened at the sight, being lifted onto someone's shoulders to see over a gathered crowd. None of it lasted more than a second before the image moved on, but each fragment left an ache behind it, the strange grief of watching a memory that was not mine and yet somehow felt as if it belonged to me. Then the image changed one final time, showing the fortress itself, whole and new, standing at the edge of a battle I could not fully understand, black shapes moving against something vast and pale in the sky above, before the image cut to darkness and the console dimmed. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The hum faded slowly, leaving the chamber quiet except for the sound of our own breathing inside our helmets. "What was that?" Bennett finally asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I think," I said slowly, my mind struggling to hold the shape of what I had just seen, "that fortress was built by us, by people from Earth, so long ago that nothing of them survived into the history we know. And whatever they were fighting, out here, past the edge of everything we ever thought we understood, is the same thing every wreck out there eventually tried to face and failed." Ryan's voice cut through the calm from the entrance, sharper now, edged with urgency, rather than his usual dry caution. "Whatever conversation you're having in there, it needs to wait. We have a problem. Multiple contacts just entered the debris field from the far side, moving fast, and they are not drifting like everything else out here." Bennett's head snapped up. "Define fast." "Powered," Ryan said, "armed, and heading straight for us." The blue light in the console flickered once more, faint and fading, as if it had shown us exactly what it wanted us to see, and nothing more, leaving the rest of the answer for whatever was about to arrive. "How many contacts?" Bennett said, already moving toward the chamber entrance, the console behind us going dark, as if it had lost interest in us the moment the console finished delivering its message. "6, Ryan said. "Small, fast, armed profile similar to some of the wrecks out there, except these ones are very much alive. They crossed into the outer debris field 90 seconds ago, and they are not slowing down. Time to intercept? At current speed, they reach the fortress in 11 minutes. They reach our shuttle in about 9. Bennett swore under her breath and broke into a run, the rest of us following close behind, boots pounding against a floor that felt warmer with every step, as if the whole structure had woken fully now and was aware of everything happening within it. "Sophie," Bennett said into the calm, voice tight but controlled, "status on the Halcyon." "I have them on long range now too," Sophie answered. 6 vessels, unfamiliar design, moving in tight formation. If they're hostile, I don't have the firepower to hold them off for long. If they're not hostile, I still don't have any way to know that until it's already too late to matter. "Get the ship into a defensive position," Bennett ordered. "Keep the shuttle bay clear for our return. We are on our way back to you." We burst out of the corridor and into open space, the black opening sealing behind us the instant the last of us cleared it, closing as smoothly as if it had never existed. I looked back at the fortress just long enough to see the surface flicker faintly with the same blue light from deep inside, before Ryan grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the shuttle. "Questions later," he said, "moving now." We launched hard, the shuttle groaning under the strain of a takeoff far rougher than the one that had brought us here, weaving between drifting wrecks that suddenly felt less like a graveyard and more like a maze closing in around us. Through the forward window, I caught my first glimpse of the approaching ships, sleek and dark, moving with a coordination that spoke of long practice rather than desperation. "They're not going for the fortress," Oliver said, staring at the tactical display. "They're going for us." "How do they even know we're here?" Ryan asked. "The activation," I said, the realization settling cold in my chest. When the console lit up, when the fortress opened for us, it wasn't quiet. Whatever signal that sent, it may have reached farther than just our own ship. "So we woke something up, and it invited company," Ryan said grimly. "Focus," Bennett said. "We get back to the Halcyon, we get behind whatever defenses we have, and we figure out the rest from there." Oliver kept his eyes on the tactical display, his voice steadier than his face looked. "I'm reading their propulsion output. Whatever those ships are, they're not improvised. That's a purpose-built design, refined over generations. This isn't a scouting party. This is a force that has done this before." "Meaning what?" Ryan asked. "Meaning I think they've come here looking for the fortress specifically," Oliver said. "Not for us. We may have simply been unlucky enough to already be in the way when they arrived." I thought back to the countdown marks scratched into the walls of the dead ship we had explored days earlier. Unfinished, cut off mid-line. Whoever these new arrivals were, they had clearly studied this graveyard more carefully than any of the wrecks scattered around it ever managed to. They had not come blind, they had come prepared, and prepared visitors rarely arrived with peaceful intentions towards something everyone else had died trying to reach. "If they know what the fortress is," I said slowly, "then maybe they also know it only responds to something specific. Maybe that's exactly why they haven't gone straight for it themselves." "Comforting thought," Ryan muttered, "assuming you're right." "I didn't say it was comforting," I said. "I said it might be true." The return trip felt longer than the trip out had, every second stretched by the growing shapes on our display, closing the distance far faster than our shuttle could manage alone. We were still 2 minutes out from the Halcyon when the first ship broke formation and angled directly toward us. "They've locked something onto us," Oliver said, voice climbing. "I don't recognize the signature, but it's definitely a weapons lock." "Sophie," Bennett said sharply, "we need cover, now." "On it," Sophie answered, and a moment later, the Halcyon's running lights flared to life ahead of us, the ship turning to place its hull between our shuttle and the incoming vessel, weapons ports opening along its flank, even though everyone on board knew our small survey ship was never built for a fight like this. The alien vessel fired first. A streak of pale light crossed the space between us, and the Halcyon shuddered as it took the hit meant to clear a path to our shuttle. Alarms blared through our comm from the ship. "Hull integrity holding." "Barely," Sophie reported, strain clear in her voice. "I can't take many more of those." "Get us inside," Bennett said. "Everyone brace." Our shuttle shot through the opening shuttle bay doors seconds later, slamming down hard enough to rattle every bone in my body, the bay doors sealing behind us as the Halcyon rocked again from another impact outside. We scrambled out of the shuttle and into the corridor, moving straight for the bridge, the ship shuddering under our feet with every step. "Report," Bennett said the moment we reached the bridge, dropping into her chair and pulling up the tactical display herself. "2 ships engaging directly," Sophie said. "The other 4 are holding back, circling the fortress instead of us. I don't know if that's caution or if they're waiting for something." "Return fire," Bennett ordered. "Minimum force, defensive only. I don't want to escalate this if there's any chance of avoiding it." "Captain, with respect," Ryan said, already moving to the weapons station, "I don't think avoiding it is on the table anymore." A hard jolt threw me against the railing behind my chair, and somewhere below decks, A warning tone began repeating in a steady, unpleasant rhythm. "That was a hull breach warning," Oliver said, scanning frantically. "Lower deck, storage section, sealed automatically. No injuries reported, but we cannot afford another hit like that." "Copy that," Bennett said, jaw tight. "Sophie, evasive pattern. Don't give them a clean shot." "Trying," Sophie answered through gritted teeth, throwing the ship into a hard bank that sent loose equipment sliding across the deck. "These things turn faster than anything I've ever flown against in simulation. Whoever built them, they were not thinking about comfort." Ryan fired again, and this time the return fire clipped the edge of one attacking vessel, sending it spinning briefly off course, before it corrected and rejoined the chase. "Small victories," he muttered, resetting the targeting array. "I'll take it." "Small victories don't win this," Bennett said. "Daniel, talk to me. Anything else from that vision? Anything at all that tells us what we're dealing with?" I closed my eyes for a second, trying to hold on to the fragments the console had shown me. The hillside, the half-built tower, the child lifted onto shoulders to see over a crowd. None of it felt like tactical information. All of it felt like grief. "I don't have a weapon system to give you," I admitted. "I have a feeling the fortress wasn't built to attack. It was built to protect something, and it only ever responded to threats that came close enough to matter. We came close enough. Maybe that's the key. Not force, not weapons, just proximity and intention." "That's not much to build a plan around," Ryan said. "It's what we have," Bennett said. "Sophie, understood." "Understood," Sophie said, and pushed the engines harder still. The ship rocked again as the two attacking vessels closed in, faster and more agile than anything we could outmaneuver. Sophie fought to keep us angled away from the worst of the incoming fire, but I could see on the display how quickly our shields were bleeding away under the pressure. "Shields at 40%, Oliver called out. "We cannot take this kind of punishment much longer." I stood near the back of the bridge, useless in a fight I had no training for, my mind racing back to the images the console had shown me. The fortress, the battle in the sky above ancient Earth. The signature carved into stone circles and cave walls long before anyone believed humans could reach beyond their own world. "The fortress," I said suddenly. "It's still out there. It's still active." "Not helpful right now, Daniel," Ryan snapped, firing another burst that clipped the nearest attacking ship without slowing it down. "No, listen," I said, moving closer to Bennett. The console responded to me. It showed me something. If that fortress really is what I think it is, if it really was built to stand against exactly this kind of threat, then it might be the only thing out here capable of stopping those ships, not us. "And how exactly do you propose we ask a 15,000-year-old structure for help in the middle of an active attack?" Bennett said, gripping her armrest as another impact rocked the ship. "I don't know," I admitted, "but it opened for me once already. Maybe it will again." Bennett looked at me for a long, tense moment, weighing a decision I could see costing her more than she wanted to show. Outside, the two attacking ships regrouped for another pass, and on the display, the four ships circling the fortress finally began to move, slow and deliberate, closing in on the ancient structure, as if they too understood exactly what it represented. "They're not just here for us," Oliver said, watching the new movement with growing alarm. "They're going for the fortress directly. I think they know what it is too." "Then we don't have much time to decide," Bennett said, turning back to me. "If you're right about this, Daniel, now is the moment to prove it. Sophie, get us as close to that structure as you safely can. Ryan, keep those two ships off our hull as long as you're able. Oliver, monitor everything that fortress does the second we're in range. Daniel, I hope to every star out there that you know what you're asking for, because we are about to find out together." Sophie pushed the engines harder than I had ever felt them run, the whole ship groaning with the strain, weaving through drifting wreckage with a precision that spoke of skill under pressure I would never have managed myself. Behind us, the two attacking ships matched our speed, weapons flaring again and again, each hit shaving away more of our failing shields. 60,000 kilometers, Sophie called out, weaving hard around a drifting hull the size of a small building. 55. Behind us, one of the pursuing ships tried a new approach, cutting across our path rather than following directly, clearly attempting to herd us toward a cluster of wreckage where our maneuvering options would shrink to almost nothing. "They're trying to box us in," Sophie warned. "If I follow the safe line, I hand them a clean shot at our stern." "Then don't follow the safe line," Bennett said. "Do whatever keeps us moving." Sophie cut hard to the left instead, taking us directly through a gap between two massive derelicts that looked barely wide enough for the Halcyon to fit through at all. For one breathless moment, the hull scraped something unseen, a shrieking metal groan running the length of the ship, and then we were through, clear on the other side, the pursuing ship forced to peel wide around the same obstacle rather than risk following our path directly. "Nicely done," Ryan said, a rare note of genuine respect in his voice. "Don't celebrate yet," Sophie said. "That bought us maybe 15 seconds. 50,000 kilometers to the fortress," Sophie called out. 40, 30. "Shields at 20%, Oliver reported, voice tight with barely controlled fear. "One more solid hit, and we lose them completely." 20,000 kilometers, Sophie said. "Daniel, whatever you're planning, now would be an excellent time." I gripped the edge of the console, staring out at the black shape growing larger ahead of us. The same structure that had shown me a version of Earth none of us had ever known. The same structure that had watched 15,000 years of failed conquerors rise and fall around it, without ever once needing to move. "Wake up," I whispered, not entirely sure who or what I was speaking to. "Please, we need you to wake up now." For one terrible, stretched-out second, nothing happened at all, and the two attacking ships closed the last of the distance behind us, weapons charging for what looked like a final, decisive strike. Then, without warning, the entire surface of the fortress ignited with pale blue light, spreading outward in an instant across every carved symbol left by every desperate visitor across 15,000 years, and the four ships circling its base scattered in sudden, obvious panic, peeling away in every direction as if something ancient and enormous had just opened its eyes for the first time in longer than any of them had ever lived. On the bridge, every alarm fell silent at once. The two ships behind us broke off their pursuit so sharply that Sophie had to correct our own course to avoid overshooting in the sudden absence of incoming fire. For a moment, all 6 attacking vessels hung motionless in space, caught between whatever orders had sent them here and whatever instinct now told them to run. "Daniel," Bennett said quietly, staring at the light spreading across the ancient structure ahead of us, "what did you just wake up?" I did not have an answer yet. All I knew was that the pull I had felt since the moment I first saw that small worn symbol carved beside 1,000 others was no longer a question waiting to be answered. It was a door, standing open, and every one of us was about to walk through it whether we felt ready or not. The light did not fade. If anything, it grew steadier, spreading from the carved symbols into the smooth black surface between them, until the entire fortress glowed like something breathing slow, deliberate breaths after a very long sleep. "They're regrouping," Oliver said, watching the 6 alien ships pull back into a loose formation at the edge of the debris field, weapons still active but no longer firing, as if even they were uncertain what to do with what they were witnessing. "They haven't retreated fully. They're waiting." "So are we," Bennett said. "Sophie, hold position. Nobody make a move until we understand what we just triggered." I could not look away from the fortress. Every carved message left by every failed visitor across 15,000 years now glowed faintly beneath the surface light, as if the structure itself were finally reading every warning, every countdown, every desperate final word ever etched into its walls. Then a voice came through the ship's comm system, calm and clear, speaking in words I understood without needing to translate them, though I could not explain how that was possible. "Identification confirmed," the voice said. "Custodian awakened. State your intention." Nobody on the bridge moved. Ryan's hand hovered near his weapon controls, though there was nothing visible to aim at. Sophie kept her grip steady on the helm, ready to pull us away at the first sign of danger. Bennett looked at me, and I understood without being told that whatever answer came next needed to come from me. "We came to understand," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Not to take anything, not to fight. We found this place by accident, and everyone who came before us seems to have found only silence in return. We would like something different." The light along the fortress pulsed once, slow and deliberate, and the voice answered again. Understanding was requested only twice in 15,000 years. Both requests ended before completion. You are the third. "What happened to the other two?" Bennett asked quietly, leaning toward the comm as if the fortress could see her as clearly as it apparently heard us. "They were interrupted," the voice said, "by those who came seeking only weapons and mistook patience for weakness." Outside, the 6 waiting ships shifted position slightly, and I felt a fresh wave of tension roll through the bridge. "Are they a threat to what you protect?" Bennett asked. "They are the latest in a long line who believe this place holds power to be seized," the voice answered. "They are not wrong that power exists here. They are wrong about what kind and what it costs to take it without understanding it first." "And us," I said. "What do you see when you look at us?" There was a pause, longer than any before it, the light along the fortress dimming and brightening in slow, thoughtful waves. "I see descendants," the voice finally said, "changed almost beyond recognition, having forgotten almost everything, yet still carrying the same mark your ancestors left when they built this place to guard what they could not carry with them when they were forced to leave." The bridge went utterly silent. Even Ryan, who had spent the entire encounter braced for violence, seemed to forget his weapon controls entirely. "Forced to leave from where?" I asked, though some part of me already feared the answer. "From the world you now call your own," the voice said. "Long before your written history began, your ancestors reached far beyond their small world, farther than you have managed again even now. They built strongholds like this one, to hold a line against a danger that threatened to consume everything they had built. In the end, the cost of holding that line was too great. Most who remained on your world lost the knowledge of what had been achieved, along with almost everything else. What survived only in fragments, carved into stone circles and cave walls, remembered as myth rather than history." "And this fortress?" Bennett asked. "What exactly is it guarding after all this time?" "A seed," the voice said simply. "Preserved knowledge, preserved capability, meant to be returned to your people only when they proved capable of asking for it honestly, rather than simply reaching for it out of hunger. Every visitor before you who tried to force the answer instead triggered a different response, one built specifically to ensure that what waits here could never be taken by force, only given freely." "And the 6 ships outside," I said, "what happens to them now?" "That depends on what they choose next," the voice answered. "I do not destroy without cause. I have never destroyed without cause, in 15,000 years. Every wreck surrounding this place chose violence first, and received precisely the response their own intention demanded. Those who leave in peace, leave in peace. It has always been a choice, even if very few ever believed that to be true." Bennett exchanged a glance with the rest of us, weighing something heavy behind her eyes. "Can you communicate with them the way you are communicating with us?" "I can," the voice said. "Would you like me to offer them the same choice I offered you?" I felt every eye on the bridge turn toward me, though the decision clearly belonged to Bennett rather than to me alone. She hesitated only a moment before answering. "Yes," she said, "offer them the choice. We did not come here to start a war, and I would rather this end without one, if that's still possible." The light along the fortress shifted, spreading outward in a slow wave that reached toward the 6 waiting ships at the edge of the field. For a long, tense minute, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the ships began to turn, engines flaring as they angled away from the fortress, away from us, retreating back the way they had come, without firing another shot. "They're leaving," Sophie said, disbelief clear in her voice. "All 6 of them. They're actually leaving. For now, the voice said, whether they return with different intentions is a choice only they can make. My purpose here was never to end every threat permanently. It was only ever to protect what was left in my care until the right hands returned to claim it honestly. Bennett let out a slow breath, some of the tension finally easing from her shoulders. And you believe that's us? I believe it is worth finding out, the voice said, which is a different thing entirely, and perhaps the only honest answer I am able to give after so long alone. I stepped closer to the comm, though there was nothing physical to step toward. What happens now? What is this seed you spoke of, and what does receiving it actually mean for us? It means responsibility, the voice said, not simply power, though power is part of what remains here. Knowledge of a kind your people set aside long ago, in the fields of construction, of energy, of understanding your own place within a much larger sky than the one you currently believe you occupy. It would change what your people are capable of, in ways both wonderful and dangerous, depending entirely on the hands that carry it forward. Can you tell us more about what forced our ancestors to leave? Oliver asked, leaning toward the comm now, his scientific curiosity apparently strong enough to override even the caution he had carried through most of the encounter. What was the danger they were fighting? That answer is not mine to give freely, the voice said, not from unwillingness, but from design. The knowledge was sealed in layers, each requiring a different measure of trust before release. What I have shared already exceeds what any visitor before you has been given. The deeper answers wait behind thresholds your people have not yet reached. That sounds like a very convenient excuse for not telling us everything, Ryan said, arms crossed, some of his old suspicion returning now that the immediate danger had passed. It may sound that way, the voice agreed, without any defensiveness in its tone. Yet consider this. Every visitor who demanded full answers immediately, rather than earning them gradually, ended their visit here in wreckage. Patience was never a test of worthiness alone. It was also protection, for you as much as for what I guard. Ryan had no response to that, though I noticed his arms uncrossed slightly, some of the tension leaving his posture. That's an enormous decision to make on behalf of an entire species, Bennett said carefully. Not something 4 people on a survey ship should decide alone. An honest answer, the voice said, and something in its tone, calm and patient as it was, carried a note that almost sounded like approval. That honesty is precisely why I am willing to wait a while longer. I have waited 15,000 years already. I can wait for your people to decide together, rather than forcing the choice through the hands of whoever happens to arrive first. Relief and disappointment mixed strangely in my chest at those words. Some small, hungry part of me had wanted to walk away from this moment, holding an answer bright and complete enough to change everything. Instead, I was being handed something far more difficult, the responsibility of carrying a story home and trusting others to decide wisely what to do with it. What do you need from us then? I asked, if not to take everything today. Only your word, the voice said, that you will carry what you have learned here honestly, without exaggeration and without concealment, to those who decide such things among your people, and that you will return when your people are ready, prepared to ask again rather than simply to take. Bennett looked around the bridge, at Ryan, at Sophie, at Oliver, and finally at me, before answering for all of us. You have my word, she said, for whatever it's worth, coming from someone who arrived here expecting nothing more than an unusual sensor reading. It is worth a great deal, the voice said, more than you may currently understand. Very few visitors in 15,000 years ever offered their word before first offering their weapons. The light along the fortress began to dim slowly, retreating back into its carved symbols one by one, until only the faintest blue glow remained deep within the black stone, the same quiet pulse we had first noticed days earlier before any of this began. Before you go, the voice said, softer now, know that what you carry home is not only knowledge, it is also warning. Every wreck surrounding this place was once a people much like your own, curious enough to reach this far, and careless enough to reach for the wrong thing once they arrived. Carry that memory with the rest of what you have learned. It matters just as much. We will, I said quietly, and I meant it more deeply than I had meant almost anything in my life. The fortress fell fully silent then, the voice gone. The light settled back into its long, familiar dimness, patient and unhurried, exactly as it had been for 15,000 years before we arrived, and exactly as it seemed prepared to remain for however long it took humanity to decide what kind of people we truly wanted to be. We flew home slower than we had flown out, none of us in any particular hurry to leave the silence of that place behind, each of us wrestling privately with the weight of what we now carried. Ryan spent most of the return trip unusually quiet, running diagnostics on systems that did not need running, the closest he ever came to admitting he needed something to occupy his hands while his mind worked through everything we had witnessed. Sophie kept the ship on a careful, steady course, checking and rechecking our path as if the discipline of navigation offered some comfort the rest of us lacked. Oliver spent hours reviewing every scrap of data we had gathered, determined to have answers ready for whoever we reported to, though I suspected even he understood that no amount of data could fully prepare anyone for the conversation waiting for us back home. I spent much of that return trip simply staring out at the stars, turning over the fragments the console had shown me. The hillside, the half-built tower, the child lifted onto shoulders to see over a crowd. Small, human moments, buried inside a memory far older than anything my own species remembered keeping. I thought about the stone circle in Ireland, the cave wall in France, the fragment of pottery from a hillside in Turkey, and wondered how many more marks like that one were scattered quietly across our own world, waiting patiently to be recognized for what they truly were. One evening, midway through the long trip home, Oliver called the four of us together in the briefing room one final time, not for orders this time, but simply to talk, the way people do when they have shared something too large to carry alone. "I keep thinking about the countdown marks," he said. "The ones scratched into the walls of that first wreck. Whoever left them believed they were running out of time for something. I wonder now if they were trying to prove themselves worthy too, racing against some deadline only they understood, and simply ran out of patience before they ran out of time. Or they never had a chance to understand patience was even the answer," Sophie said quietly. "Maybe nobody told them. Maybe we're the first ones who happened to get lucky enough to ask the right question before reaching for the wrong thing." "Luck had very little to do with it," Ryan said, surprising all of us. Daniel didn't guess his way through that conversation. He answered honestly, because that's simply who he is. I've worked beside him long enough to know he wasn't performing patience back there. He meant every word. I did not know how to respond to that, so I said nothing, letting the quiet settle comfortably over the room instead. It was strange, hearing Ryan, of all people, defend the very instinct he had spent days warning against. Perhaps that was its own kind of lesson too, one none of the ancient carvings on that fortress wall could have taught us nearly as well as watching each other through days of genuine danger. "What happens when we tell people back home?" Oliver asked eventually. "Really tell them, not just the summary version for an official report." "Some will be afraid," Bennett said. "Some will be excited in ways that worry me more than the fear does. A few, if we're fortunate, will understand exactly why patience mattered as much as it did out there, and will carry that same patience forward instead of rushing back out to claim what waits for us before we're ready to receive it responsibly." "And if they don't?" I asked. "If someone decides to go back out there anyway, without waiting, without asking properly?" Nobody answered right away. Eventually Bennett spoke, quiet and certain. "Then I imagine that fortress will do exactly what it has done for 15,000 years already. It will wait, and it will watch, and it will answer honesty with patience and hunger with silence, regardless of who arrives next or how confident they feel walking in." Bennett found me there one evening, ship time meaningless out in the open dark, and sat beside me without a word for a long while before finally speaking. "You did well back there," she said. "I don't think many people would have known what to say to something like that." "I didn't know what to say," I admitted. "I only knew what I actually believed, and said that instead. Sometimes that's the same thing, she said. We're going to have a difficult conversation when we get home. Not everyone is going to want to wait patiently for humanity to decide together. Some people are going to want to go straight back out there and take whatever's waiting, the moment they hear what we found. I know, I said. But the fortress waited 15,000 years already. Maybe part of the lesson is that some things are only ever worth having if you're patient enough to earn them honestly. Bennett was quiet for a while longer, watching the stars slide past the viewport with me. Do you think we'll go back? I think we have to, I said. Not to take anything, just to keep our word. I have a feeling that's the only kind of visitor that place has ever truly been waiting for. She nodded slowly, and neither of us said anything else for a long time, letting the quiet stretch comfortably between us as the halcyon carried us steadily back toward the small blue world we called home, carrying with us a story 15,000 years old and a promise we now had to find the courage to keep. Behind us, past Pluto, past the last thin edge of everything humanity had ever charted, the fortress remained exactly as it always had, dark and silent and patient, surrounded by the quiet wreckage of every conqueror who ever mistook patience for weakness, waiting once more for whoever might return next, and hoping, in whatever way something so old and so careful could hope, that the next visitors would remember to ask before they reached.